Well, looky here. What do we got here? We got ourselves another episode of Mouth Dancing with your host Young. I wanted to tell you a joke to start this one off. How many dentists does it take to screw in a light bulb? 3. 1 to hold it, 1 to suck him off, and 1 to cup his balls. It's an oldie but a goodie right there. It's one of those classic, how many does it take to screw in a light bulb type jokes. You ever notice how people talk about 30 is the new 20? It seemed like about 20 years ago people said that a lot. And then it seems to keep progressively getting older. It's like 40 is the new 20. Or 50 is the new 20. So people are just holding off aging psychologically with this sort of coping mechanism. They're saying, well, I'm actually not that old, because people these days age differently, and now it's like the new 20 is however old I am at the moment. So I'm not really that old. But I wonder if that means, wouldn't there be a corresponding extension in life expectancy? So if 40 or 30 or 50 is the new 20, then that means people would be living 30 years longer, right? So then, does that mean people are dying at the age of 120 now on average? I think that would have to be the case if these new, older ages were the new 20, right? But I don't think that's the case. I think life expectancies have even gone down a little bit from what I've read. They used to be a little bit higher, in the late 70s to early 80s. But I think these days it's gone down to mid 70s. Just more stress probably people are dealing with or something. But maybe that's just the current generation of older people, and maybe these people who are saying, 30 is the new 20, maybe they're actually living 10 years longer. Maybe they can, predict their own life expectancy or something, Maybe that's what's going on. And I think the oldest life expectancies are in certain small, kind of rural places, like in Okinawa or some small village in Italy or something. I think those are the places that tend to have the longest life expectancies. But I don't think the people there in those places have an extended adolescence, where they're I'm still basically a 20-year-old when they're 40 or 50, I think that only happens probably in the West, like in America, or places like Australia or England or New Zealand. I don't think people in Okinawa, when they're 40 are oh, I'm still basically a 20-year-old, and they're gossiping with their friends or something. They're probably just living like normal adults. I think the thing that gives you a longer life expectancy is a healthy lifestyle, of course, and living in a community of people that you're really familiar with and you feel comfortable around. And I also think having a nice routine all the time is really good for you. These people in these types of small towns where they live forever, they tend to do the same thing every day pretty much. They wake up at the same time, eat similar foods, and they're around lots of friends and family all the time. They're not, living this sort of hedonistic modern Western lifestyle. I don't think that's what's going on in these places. I saw the sun yesterday for the first time in a long time. It's kind of weird. I'd almost forgotten what it looked like, because it had been raining or snowing or just cloudy for the last, it felt 5 months or something since last fall. And it was kind of weird to see it. But of course it's cloudy and raining again. But it was nice to see the sun. It made me happy, but it felt sort of foreign. I was like, what is that? What is that thing? probably shouldn't be staring at it because it's like hurting my eyeballs. I think it's something called the sun. I vaguely remember learning about this in school, I think. You're not supposed to look at it for too long. I think the Earth gets all of its energy from the sun, and without the sun, all life on the planet would die out. It's amazing that, considering how essential the sun is to life, that somewhere like the Pacific Northwest can exist and barely see it like throughout the year. I guess in the spring and the summer you see it a little bit, but the rest of the time you don't see it that much. And how is life being sustained in this region without the sun? Maybe that's why people tend to be very sort of disheveled and slothful and irritable and withdrawn and antisocial around here, because they're barely alive. The sun isn't keeping them alive like it is in other places, you know? Other humans on the planet, they see the sun more often and it invigorates them. It gives them life. Here, people just try to get all their energy from sucking down coffee. And then they try to like deal with the depression by smoking lots of weed or drinking lots of alcohol or doing other drugs. That's the way the doghouse rumbles around here, you know? It's like that famous song, Who Let the Dogs Out? There's a commercial about that now. Have you ever noticed on LinkedIn a lot of like middle-aged people's profile pictures are super dated? They don't post like a recent picture of themselves, it seems like a lot of times. And you're like, what the fuck? This picture looks like it was taken in like the 1970s or 80s or something, when the person was still young. I don't know, in a way it's kind of sad though. I think it's, maybe they have to do that because the workplace is very ageist, you know? You want to get a job, you gotta sort of fake it to make it, they say, right? Maybe they gotta pretend they're younger than they really are, or give the impression that they are. But I mean, obviously at some point it's gonna become obvious that they're not the age in their profile picture, right? Because, well, first of all, the picture's obviously really old. Second, the work history is like 50 years long, so they're obviously not a young person if they graduated in like 1965. And, you know, when they do a Zoom call, or if they're working remotely, or when they're in the office and people see them, obviously it's not going to be a super young person. So I wonder why you would even bother doing that. Maybe it's just to avoid the ageism in the initial, you know, job, like, application process, you know? Like, maybe if I can just trick them until I get the interview, then I'll be able to get the job. I don't know, maybe it must be working if they're using these profile pictures that are really old. Kind of a sad commentary on society, isn't it? And, you know, I think a lot of times there's ageism in the workplace because, not just because the younger people don't want to work with an older person, but because they have to pay the person a lot more. You know, the more experience someone has, the higher of a salary they command. You know, you hear stories of like an older person who gets fired and then replaced with like two younger junior people whom the company doesn't even have to pay as much, even though there's two of them now. It's pretty crazy. Well, I think a lot of older people would be willing to take a job cut to have a job, you know? You don't have to, just because someone has 30 years of experience doesn't mean you have to pay them 5 times as much. I think that's kind of weird. I think a lot of older people would be happy to just have a job and get a decent salary. So companies shouldn't feel pressured in the first place to pay someone a lot more just because they're older. But then again, maybe the boomers kind of ruined everything by saying, well, I have so much experience that you have to pay me like 6 figures, you know, to do some basic administrative work. It's greedy people like that who fucking ruin it for everyone else. I mean, the boomers fucked up a lot of stuff in America, like the housing market and the job market too. And they're the ones who tend to be like Karens, right? The ones you see like in viral videos acting like real fucks at like a store, the ones who are always demanding to see the manager. They're usually boomers. I guess there could be younger boomers like Gen X or millennials every once in a while, but they're usually boomers. So, actually, I don't feel that much sympathy for them after all about the ageism they have to deal with because they sort of made their own bed. And it's pretty much their fault that they deal with this shit because they have a reputation for being assholes and selfish, demanding too much stuff, being entitled, and just being unpleasant to be around and full of themselves. That generation really fucking sucks. I think it's because they were raised by the supposed greatest generation, the people who fought in the world wars, and everything. America was booming at the time. People were doing pretty well economically, so they raised their kids as real spoiled pieces of shit, And also, they gave their kids really huge egos because they're like, "This is the greatest country in the world. You can be whatever you want. You do whatever you want." And then they raise these shitty, entitled people who are still fucking plaguing this planet to this day, even though they're like in their 70s now or something. Fuck. Can't wait for them to all die out. In the future, people will probably be saying this about my generation. But that's okay. At least I hope my generation has a reputation for not being as big of fuckheads as the boomers. But I'm not sure. I'm seeing more and more anti-Gen X jokes online. They're sort of replacing the boomer jokes because boomers are sort of aging out of society, and the new old people are people from my generation, like Gen X, even millennials a little bit. We're all aging into like middle age and older, and we're the new villains. So, just come at me, bro. You got something to say to me? Come at me. I don't think I'm quite as shitty as a boomer, especially a white boomer. So, cut me some slack, Jack. Because I'm gonna cut you some slack, I'm not one of those people who hates and is all jealous of the younger generation. I don't constantly, criticize young people and make fun of them. But then again, it doesn't really matter on an individual level what I do. People are gonna generalize, kind of like I did with boomers, right? They're gonna say, well, for the most part, Gen X sucks, so I don't care if that one guy is nice. I don't know, it doesn't matter. These generation, what do you call these? These generational battles will always be around. We have to transcend age somehow. But I don't think it's by saying 50 is the new 20. That's just kind of living in denial. It's like looking at the scale and it says 160 pounds, and you're like, yeah, I don't think that's right, though. I think something's wrong with the scale, or maybe it's because I have my socks on, or I'm wearing a belt. You don't want to live in that kind of denial of reality. It's not healthy. Probably some sort of psychological issue, which, I deal with that as well. I have that issue. Denial, sometimes it crops up. Something happens I don't like, or I mess up or something, and I'm like, well, that didn't really quite happen, right? Or this can't be explained by, it's not any fault of mine, basically. I think that's the kind of reasoning that goes on a lot of times. Best way to counteract that is by just looking things right in the face and saying, I see you, and I recognize you, and I'm gonna just deal with you as you are. Let's all deal with each other and with life as we are and as it is. And on that note, I'd like to end this episode. Thank you again for listening, and see you next week. Bye.